The question is, a horizontal force of 140 newtons is needed to pull a 60 kg across a horizontal floor at a constant speed. The question is, determine the coefficient of friction between the floor and the box. So this is one of the problems under Newton's laws of motion. Of course, it is one of the questions under the applications of Newton's laws of motion. So here we've been given the information to say a force of 140, so force is equal to 140 newtons, and the mass is 60 kg. Then the velocity or speed is constant, so meaning the acceleration is 0 because there's no change in velocity. Okay, now let's find the coefficient of kinetic friction. The coefficient of kinetic friction. So let me just wrap the top part here and see how we're going to proceed. Okay, so we're going to proceed with a free body diagram. A free body diagram. Okay, so here we have this force pulling in this direction, newtons. Then we have the force that is opposing the motion, the force of kinetic friction, the friction force. Then we have the weight acting in the downward direction, and then we have the normal force acting in that direction. Okay, so now from Newton's second law of motion, Newton's motion, summation of forces should be equal to ma. But because of the fact that we do not have acceleration there, the summation of forces will be equal to 0. Okay, so now let us try to see the summation of forces in the y direction. We have, okay, the summation of forces in y should be equal to 0. So we have n and mg. So n minus mg will give us 0. So our n will be mg. Okay. Now, the summation of forces again, the summation of forces in x will be 0. Okay, so we have this one pulling in that direction, which is the 140 newtons, minus the friction force, should give us 0. So we're going to have the friction force, in fact, the kinetic friction force, which is this, will be equal to 140 newtons. So this force and this force are going to be equal according to Newton's second law of motion, and since we do not have acceleration. Now, we know that this one, the kinetic friction or the force of friction is given by this formula, N, where N is equal to the normal force acting on a body. And according to what we have seen, we have found this N to be equal to mg. So this one is going to be mu mg. And because of the fact that this is force of kinetic friction, we are going to say friction force is equal to coefficient of kinetic friction times mg. Okay, so let's call this as equation 1, and let us call this equation 2. So equation 1 into 2, we are going to have this one, uk mg is equal to 140 newtons. So let's make this the subject by dividing by mg, and even here by dividing by mg. Okay, so here what we're going to have is our coefficient of kinetic friction. Okay, so here this kg will go n, and n will record, we're going to have 140 over 600, which will give us 0.2333. Okay, so this one, our mu, okay, coefficient of kinetic friction.